The Fallacy of Ghost, written by Bob V. Myers. Narrated by Thomas J. Deshler. I suppose all sane people, or at least most, are well aware that ghosts and witches simply do not exist. Most ghostly tales are written for amusement rather than for fact. In this tale, although truthful and accurate in every detail, I don't propose to advance the reality of ghosts. I am still frequently visited by unexplainable beings bearing assorted favors, if one chooses to call them such. I feel it is merely trickery trying to confuse my mental state. It all started some time ago as I was walking through the timbered countryside, somewhat removed from the populated areas. I came up on a snow-white rabbit with its leg quite ensnarled in a ball of glittery twine, very much like some twines used at Christmas time. Now right from the beginning one can see this is trickery, as rabbits are not snow-white in the summertime, and this one was, but nonetheless I ventured to help the unfortunate creature. Each time I would reach it, the rabbit would simply move off into the forest. If I would falter, as if giving up, it would become more entwined, till I was sure it could not move. Doing this repeatedly, I ventured far into the woods, very much away from my intended path. Then, quite by accident, I came upon a small log cabin set back in a tangle of wildberry bushes, all but out of sight. As the rabbit tumbled into the brush, my sharp eyes spied the wooden door with its wrought iron hinges and brass doorknob. The door was slightly ajar, and I stole a peek inside. Momentarily, I forgot the plight of the poor rabbit. The sight that met my eyes was indeed disturbing. There, bound to a wooden chair, with seemingly the same kind of twine that bound the rabbit, was a petite, white-haired lady wearing an ankle-length print dress. Except for a wooden table on which a burning candle sat, and the chair she was tied to, the room was empty. I quickly stepped into the cabin, asking of the little lady's predicament. She smiled at me and said in a sweet voice that she was glad I had come so quickly. "Quickly," I replied. "It is quite by accident that I'm here at all." "Oh no," she said. "I sent Deshler for you. Now you must free me, and I shall be forever in your debt." "Of course I'll free you," I said, and quickly began to untie the twine. My fingers were instantly burned, causing me to jump back, shaking my hands violently. "No, no," she said. "The candle. Pinch the candle out." Now right here, I should have suspected the trickery and gone to free the rabbit, but she seemed so small and helpless that I agreed to blow out the candle. I blew on it, but it only flickered. So I blew mightily at it, and again it only flickered. There was a tiny laughter behind me, and embarrassed I turned to find the white rabbit sitting in the doorway. "Now, Deshler, you must not be amused at the nice gentleman. He doesn't know." "Don't know what?" I said, confused at what was taking place. "How did you get untangled?" I asked the rabbit before I realized I was talking to a rabbit. "Now, Deshler, don't confuse our friend before he pinches the candle out," the little lady said. "I'll tell you right now, I don't believe this hocus-pocus stuff. I'll blow your candle out, then I'll be on my way." "You can't blow the candle out. Pinch it out," the little lady said. "But you'll have to use your thumbs." "Well, I never saw a candle I couldn't blow out," I replied, defending my manhood to the point of blowing out a candle. I quickly blew with all my breath and some moisture, but the flame never bent or flickered. The tiny laugh came from the door again, and I turned angrily to the rabbit. Realizing it was some kind of a joke, I turned again to the candle. "It would be so easy, kind sir, if you would only pinch it out with your thumbs," the little lady spoke. "Look, I've burned all my fingers once," I said, looking around for something to smother the candle. "Yes, I know, and I'm sorry, kind sir, but you can't get burned on a candle." She convinced me somehow that you can't get burned on a candle, and I stepped closer to pinch the flame, but it flared till it burned at least 2 feet high. "He's only bluffing you, sir," the rabbit spoke from the doorway. "What's bluffing? Who?" I said, turning to the rabbit, somewhat flustered. "Just what are you guys trying to pull?" I said. "And rabbits can't talk, and if you're so damn smart, rabbit, you put it out, because a flame that size can burn." "I can't, because I am also a witch, and witches can't put out the flames of Sor," the rabbit spoke in a tiny but natural wave. Now, please, kind sir. I'll explain everything if you will just take the flame between your thumbs and pinch it out. Please, sir, please," the little lady said. "And Deshler, you remain silent." "Okay, I'll try it," I said. "But I'm telling you, I think the joke has gone far enough. I dislike being the brunt of a cheap joke." With that stated, I stepped forth to what I decided would be my last role in somebody's joke. I deliberately went to the flaming candle with both thumbs protruding, slightly embarrassed at the laughter that someone must surely be having at my expense. The flame shot up until it licked the ceiling, but I was unshaken, and placing a thumb on either side, I quickly smashed the base of the flame. It went out with a sighing of air, and a shadow disappeared out the door. I stood surprised by this, as much at the fact that the flame was not hot at all. I was only aware of the little old lady when she said, "Now, what is your heart's desire?" I turned, and she was standing in the middle of the room, quite free of her bonds and quite translucent. The white rabbit was sitting calmly in the chair. "Hey, how'd you get loose?" I asked, a bit startled, because she was the most convincing-looking ghost I'd ever seen. "Why, you set me free when you snuffed out the flame of Sor, and now I'm forever in your debt." "How? Why? I don't believe all this, you know. I'm a very well-read man, and ghosts simply don't exist." "See, I am the ghost of Strautany, and I was taken quite by surprise, and bound by a dastardly warlock," the little old lady explained. "You see, I had to be released by a living mortal," she said. "In exactly this way the warlock stated. I had only Deshler to help me, and he in the form of a rabbit, but you freed me, and now I'll repay you as best I can." I looked for the strings that must have suspended the ghost figure before me, but of course they were hidden. Then the ghost was jerked out of the door before I could bring my full wits to work against it. The rabbit too was gone. The candle had also been removed, lest I should discover the secret of the trickery. As I stepped out into the open sunlight, I felt a strangeness about me. I looked, and the pranksters had removed the cabin. I was left with only my thoughts. I spent little time searching, as one could see it was a well-laid plan. I resumed my walk through the forest, though by now I'd completely forgotten why I was there at all. Trying to find the culprit that was behind all this hocus-pocus proved to be rather embarrassing. People began to talk of me in strange ways as white rabbits and little old ladies entered into my conversations more and more frequently. At times, the whole joke took on a somewhat humorous turn, as was the case when the rabbit took on a farmer's dog and sent them running, quite by trickery, of course. But it was amusing, and I was glad for the help. I had been fishing in a small stream that bubbled through the nearby countryside. I had extremely good luck in a stream where the native people swore there were no fish. I headed back to my car when from a nearby farmyard someone hollered profanity about trespassing. 2 large, snarling dogs came bounding at me. With a string of fish, a fishing pole, and waders, I never outran them for a minute. I tripped and fell down in some tall grass, barely missing a white rabbit. I heard someone. It seemed like the rabbit saying, "Don't worry, I'll fan their tails." With that, the rabbit met the dogs head-on. I had barely attained a kneeling position in time to see the rabbit chasing those 2 brutish dogs. They turned yelping back toward their master, who was running excitedly, waving his arms, again using profanity. The rabbit still in pursuit, jumping, kicking. First one, then the other, until the dogs reached their master. Trying to evade the aggressive rabbit, the dogs dove under the farmer, upsetting him, and they all went down in a tangle of cursing and yelping, legs and tails flying. I heard a tiny laugh as the rabbit disappeared into the tall grass. The man who owned the dog summoned the sheriff and filed charges against me, but dropped the whole thing after he tried to explain my large catch of fish, plus a rabbit that had assaulted his dogs. The sheriff was laughing outright, and I wisely admitted to nothing. It became harder and harder to explain white rabbits and flying little old ladies, so I began mentioning them less and less. In my own mental state, I was expecting them, but shrewdly plotted to uncover the trickery by which they were operating. I began by trying to trick them into appearing where I could have my wits about me and no one would suspect I had set traps for the manipulators of ghostly pranks. First, I fenced portions of my yard, leaving only 3 entrances. Then, with great secrecy from prying eyes, I set up a camouflage nets over various places. These were sprung by hidden strings across the trail that would drop the nets on the suspects below. Also, I rigged up cans of red and green food coloring in front of fans. When tripped, the liquid color would spill into the air blast of fans. This would surely add color to white rabbits and flying little old ladies, or anyone else sneaking about. In this way, I could easily follow them or identify them later. In any event, the prankster would be the surprise one, and would think twice before fooling with me again. I laughed many times, anticipating the result of my shrewd scheme. When all was ready, I plotted to some extent how to best get into trouble. I even shyly dropped some hints that I may be a setup for a stick-up in my yard, hoping someone would carry it off from there. Nothing happened and time began to drag, so I decided to execute it myself. So, one evening, I planned to practice the fundamentals of faking trouble. Stepping off my porch, I executed a stunt fall, grabbing my leg, rolling about as if in pain. I was moaning and carrying on when I spied a stately matron of town coming to my rescue. She, the wife of a local commissioner, was out doing welfare work. Before I could warn her away, she was caught in a net and fell to the ground in a very undignified manner. Then she began screaming and thrashing about. Forgetting everything except for the trouble I was going to be in, I rushed to the lady's rescue. Unfortunately, I tripped on one of those paint devices and only succeeded in getting myself and the buxom lady sprayed with red paint. Her confounded screaming began to get results in the form of helpful neighbors, and I quickly caught an elderly gentleman in a net and thoroughly painted a young high school lad green. I was beside myself as a policeman came running. Upon seeing me standing over the screaming lady, both of us blood red, he drew his gun as he entered the yard and was quickly engulfed in a net and painted. As the commotion increased, so did the crowd. Needless to say, it did take time for the commotion to settle down, and the only laughter I heard came from a white rabbit in a nearby bush. I was, of course, hauled downtown by a group of policemen. Upon finding no real damage and trying to hold back grins, that is except for one very red policeman, and after a few fruitless attempts to explain the whole situation, I was given a room with bars on it and a pan of water with which to wash away the red paint. As I turned about, a wisp of smoke appeared and a little old lady with white hair stepped out of it. "Tell them you were experimenting with some new secret burglar device, and that you will pay for any damage," she said sweetly. "I'm sure they'll let you go." Needless to say, I was set free, although one policeman with a reddish tint and one commissioner was not entirely satisfied. After this adventure, I found it best not to mention the rabbit and the little old lady anymore, although sometimes I found it hard not to speak of them. One such time came only last week, when I was hailed as a hero and a champion. This all came about one evening, as I was leaving a local tavern. I had just opened the door to my car when two large men approached me asking for money and the use of my car. I gave no thought to turning them down, as they did mention something about broken bones if I chose to resist. As I was handing them my keys and wallet, one of them grunted and reeled as if he had been struck, whereupon his partner stepped in, intent on smashing me, or so he said. I threw my hand up to protect my face, and my assailant grunted. His knees buckled and he fell to the ground. There was a familiar laugh, and I was looking for a white rabbit when the crowd started gathering. It was soon established that I had heroically beaten two very tough hoodlums, one of whom was a professional fighter and not easily felled. I started to explain about a rabbit or tricks, but it just wasn't working out for me, and I was soon facing two choices: the nut house or a hero's role. It would have been much less complicated had they taken my money and car. The newspapers said I used some devices I'd developed in my yard and wondered why I hadn't painted the two hoodlums just for laughs. Or was that reserved for charitable ladies and policemen? I'm getting letters from people wanting my secrets of how a frail fellow like myself could overcome two large assailants. When I try to explain, I only make enemies because I won't help my fellow man. So I say to you, although I don't believe in ghosts and such, I'm becoming more and more astounded by the feats that can be performed by rabbits.